Marvel's Avengers was a 2012 superhero-based movie that was produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney. It was the sixth movie in the MCU and was directed and written by Joss Whedon. It began development in 2005 and began production in 2011. It was released as the last film of MCU's Phase 1. It had numerous awards and nominations with notable achievements for especially visual effects. The estimated budget for this movie was $220 million, and it became a huge success in the box office, grossing over $1.5 billion worldwide, becoming the third highest grossing movie of all time and the highest grossing movie of 2012. It was the first Marvel production to generate $1 billion in ticket sales alone, and the movie was featured as one of the 100 greatest movies of all time. The movie told us of a story of how the Avengers team was formed and why. Nick Fury was Avengers' head of S.H.I.E.L.D., a spy agency that specialized in anything extraterrestrial and supernatural, recruited a band of ragtag superheroes to stop Loki, the god of mischief, and Thor's brother from subjugating the Earth. The purpose of this fanfiction is to explore the possibilities that the Batman from The Dark Knight Rises was one of the people considered to form the Avengers. The question is, what if Batman had been a part of the Avengers? How do you think the story would have gone if he was? Move your seats closer to the screen and watch every bit as we take you on this cinematic journey. Loki had just escaped from the helicarrier after killing Coulson. Killing Coulson had hurt Fury very much, and he took it personal and really hard, but decided to use his death as a source of motivation to get the superheroes he had brought together to actually work together. He knew his team needed a mastermind, someone who was strategic and would think like the enemy. Someone who could outsmart Loki in his own game. There was no better person for this job than the infamous Batman. That was the person Fury wanted for the job of leading the Avengers, but the problem was no one had ever heard of this Batman. The Avengers looked clueless as Nick Fury talked about this person. Seeing that they were lost, Fury decided to explain the multiverse theory, telling them a different version of a world existed simultaneously. And on one very similar to their world existed this Batman, which he was going to use a portal device to bring the Batman to help. Meanwhile, back in Gotham, the Batman had just tackled Two-Face to his death unintentionally. In an attempt to save Dent's reputation, he asked Gordon to blame Dent's death and crimes on him completely. Because of this, the people hated him and loved Dent. But it didn't matter because he had thought Dent was the kind of hero Gotham needed at that point. After the incident, Batman decided to leave the crime scene and was never going to play hero again. He jumped off the ledge of the building trying to get towards the Batmobile when a portal suddenly opened up and sucked him in. He landed on the helicarrier surrounded by Nick, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and the Avengers. Batman immediately became defensive, bringing out his Batarang, but Fury instantly addressed him by his name, calling him Bruce and telling him that they're friends. But Batman didn't believe him. He asked Fury who he was and how he knew his name and where he was. And Fury explained all his questions, telling him that he was in an alternate world that needed his expertise. He also told him just to relax, that he was among friends, heroes like himself. But Stark was flabbergasted. Batman was just a man in a costume. The team already had Captain America, why they needed another extraordinary man, but Thor reminded him that he was also ordinary too, and Stark retorted that he had his iron exosuit that gave him all his super abilities he needed. After Bruce was debriefed, he realized that Loki was very similar to his Joker, and people like him only thrived on chaos. There was only one way to deal with cancers like that, and that was to cut them off from the root. The Avengers meant not to have realized, but the lesson that he learned from the Joker was it's better to outright kill people like this. He agreed to help mostly because he saw this as a way for him to feel less guilty about what had happened to Harvey Dent, and also a way for him to redeem himself. He told Fury that he'd help, but he needed unrestricted access to all their technology, which Stark immediately kicked against, and he didn't want this strange simpleton messing with the stuff, and Batman quickly proved to Stark that he was anything but a simpleton, and by hacking into his suit and making him hit himself until Stark agreed to share unrestricted access to his technology. Although he decided to cooperate with the Avengers, he knew deep down that when push came to shove, he was going to have to make the tough decisions none of the Avengers would be able to make. He was going to have to do what needed to be done to put a stop to this rampaging madman, or in this case, mad god. He is going to have to kill Loki for the good of all. Meanwhile, as they planned their defense, Loki used the Tesseract and the wormhole generator Selvig had built him, using to open up a wormhole above Stark Tower, which Batman had already predicted and due to his deduction, the Avengers and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were ready for the invading horde of Chitauri fleet that rained through the wormhole over the city. The Avengers headed into battle, standing their ground in the streets of New York. While Batman coordinated the battle from Stark Tower, acting as their eye in the sky, unknown to them, he had been planning Loki's demise and was not actually in Stark Tower, but outside it, trying to track down Loki. He had hacked the Hulkbuster and wore it into battle. While the Hulk battled the Chitauri ground forces side by side with Thor, and the Black Widow fought an aerial battle with the Chitauri flying fleet, Batman fought his way through the Chitauri forces to the wormhole generator, almost sure he was going to find Loki at that spot. But instead he found Selvig and knocked him unconscious, freeing him from Loki's mind control. When Selvig woke up, Batman asked him how he could stop the generators, and he told Batman that the only failsafe to the generators was actually Loki's scepter, and that without it, nothing else could stop it. Batman immediately radioed in and asked if anyone had eyes on Loki. Romanoff then told him she could see Loki, and he was headed towards Stark Tower trying to escape the chaos he caused. Batman intercepted him and asked him how he could stop the generator. Loki tried to trick him, but Batman had experience with tricksters like him. He didn't give him any chance and immediately attacked him. After beating him and leaving him bloodied on the floor, Loki screamed, and he said he gave up and told Batman that he would now take him to jail, but instead, Batman said that that's not how this game worked this time, and he was going to end him permanently. He then ran him through with his scepter, killing him. Romanoff saw Batman kill Loki and screamed, asking why he did that. Batman only replied that Loki was scum, and the only way to end this was once and for all. Thor became enraged to hear that Batman had killed his brother. His brother might have been horrible, but he was still his brother. He immediately abandoned the battle and anger to destroy the scepter, which was the only way to close the wormhole. And with the scepter destroyed, there was no other way to close the wormhole. As Batman and Thor continued to fight, there were other Avengers distracted by the Chitauri forces. The World War Council decided to send a nuclear missile towards Midtown Manhattan in a desperate attempt to end the invasion and disregarding the lives of the heroes, agents, soldiers, and civilians yet to evacuate the city. Stark decided to fly and redirect the missile into the wormhole instead in an attempt to destroy the enemy and save the city, killing two birds with one stone. He succeeded in flying the missile into the wormhole, and the missile exploded, killing Stark, but it didn't do any good as the Chitauri ships had their shields on, and they continued moving past the explosion. While Thor and Batman continued to fight, the Chitauri fleet kept pouring through the wormhole, and as the battle progressed, they overwhelmed the Avengers and finally subdued them. As Batman and Thor fought, Thor was summoned to Asgard by Odin to give answer to what happened to his brother. The other Avengers were killed or imprisoned while Batman managed to evade capture and stay hidden. The Earth was conquered by the Chitauri. The others had been able to fulfill their mission, and they immediately reached out to their master Thanos after the successful completion of their occupation of Earth, telling him that the Earth was ready for his arrival. Well, that's all for this crossover where the Batman from the Dark Knight trilogy was in the events that happened on Avengers 2012. We see how egos clashed and trust issues caused the destruction of Earth. The Batman from the Dark Knight trilogy was a darker character than most other Batman stories, and always thought that he had to be the one to take the hard decisions nobody else would. Do you think Batman would ever be able to outsmart the whole of the Avengers, especially Tony Stark? Do you think the clash of ego would have made them ununited against their common enemy? Is it possible in a bid to outdo each other, Batman and Tony would have made so many mistakes? Well, what are your thoughts on this crossover win? How do you think the twist of the story, or do you have an alternative perspective different from this one? That's all for now. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of this fanfiction, and what do you think would have happened? Share with me your thoughts on this, and let me know which What If MCU fanfiction you're interested to see next. Until then, take care, and stay safe.